Okay, here we are with part 2 of our College Algebra sample final exam review. Starting with number 9, indicate the domain for each function. So it's a square root function, the way we have here. We want to take what's underneath the radical and set it to be greater than or equal to 0. Because we know for square roots we could have 0 or larger than 0. Right? So we'll take 5 minus x, set it to be greater than or equal to 0, and we'll solve it. So we can do is add the x over, add the x, and we have 5 greater than or equal to x. Right? What does that mean if we switch it all around? Right? What that translates to is x is less than or equal to 5. Okay, so we could do a set builder notation of all x's such that x is less than or equal to 5, or you can do a interval notation, which will be negative infinity to 5 and close bracket on the 5. For our next one, we have a rational function. So in the rational, remember the denominator cannot equal 0, right? So we would set and figure out the denominator, what value would equal 0, and that's the value we would exclude. Okay, so 4 plus x, set that denominator equal to 0, minus 4, minus 4, so we know x equals negative 4. So therefore, when x doesn't equal negative 4, we have our domain. Okay, so we would say domain would be x, all x, such that x does not equal negative 4, or we could do interval notation. We can say negative infinity to negative 4 union with negative 4 to infinity. Okay, let's take a look at our next one. Final answer with positive exponents. What we want to do is, we notice there's a 2 here. We're going to have to apply that 2 to this second set of parentheses. The first set, there's no exponent on the outside, so that'll just stay the way it is. So let's start applying. I'm just going to rewrite the first one. 5 will apply the 2, so we'll have times 5 squared. A will get the 2, so we'll have a squared. And then b, we have the negative 3, power to a power, we multiply. Negative 3 times 2, negative 6. Okay, so next we have 5 squared, which is 25. Right, we're going to multiply with the negative 3. So remember, we have 25. Negative 3 times 25 is negative 75. Now we have a to the negative 1 times. In fact, I'm just going to rewrite them right next to one another, so it makes it easier for us to combine. And then the b's the same way. Okay, so when we multiply, remember to add exponents. So this will be negative 1 plus 2 is a positive 1. And then for the b's, 4 plus negative 6, that's negative 2. Okay, and so the one with the negative exponent, we're going to move to the opposite, to the denominator in this case. So we would have negative 75a, and then the b to the negative 2, we can move to the denominator as b to the positive 2. And that would be it. That's our final answer. Okay, let's take a look at our next one. Given g of x is the square root of 3 minus x, determine g of 1 minus g of negative 6. Okay, let's find g of 1. It just means we're plugging in 1 for our function. So g of 1 equals the square root of 3 minus 1, which equals the square root of 2. Let's do the g of negative 6, which equals the square root of 3 minus negative 6, which equals the square root of 9, which equals 3. So now we're just going to replace g of 1 and g of negative 6. G of 1 is square root of 2. G of negative 6 gave us 3. And that's all we could do. Square root of 2, or root 2, minus 3. And that's the final answer. Okay, let's take a look at our next one. Determine the equation of a line that contains the point 4, 3 and is perpendicular to the line 2x plus y equals 1. So remember, perpendicular, we need to remember that perpendicular slopes, when we multiply them, are equal to negative 1. Right? Another way we say this are the slopes are negative reciprocals of one another. So let's take a look at the slope that we're going to be working with from the line. 2x plus y equals 1. If we subtract 2x both sides, we have y equals negative 2x plus 1. So the slope is negative 2. That means the perpendicular slope has to be the reciprocal and the negative. So positive 1/2. Okay, so that's the slope we're using. And we have the point 4, 3. Okay, so 4, 3. And the slope we're using is 1/2. So let's go ahead and plug this into our point slope form. Y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. So let's plug in. We know that we have this will be x1, y1, and this is our m. So we plug it in. So we have y minus y1, y minus 3 equals 1/2 x minus 4. Okay, now we'll just distribute the 1/2. So we have y minus 3 equals 1/2 x minus 1/2 times 4 is 2. Okay, and then the last step, we can add the 3. Add the 3. So we have y equals 1/2 x. Negative 2 plus 3 is a positive 1. Okay, so that would be our equation in slope-intercept form. Alright, let's take a look at our next page. Solve for x. So first, when we see this, we want to make sure we FOIL this out. Okay, so x times x squared, x times 2, 2x, negative 3 times x, negative 3x, negative 3 times 2, negative 6. Okay, then we have x squared, combine like terms, plus 2x and a minus 3x is a minus x. And then what we want to do is get this to say equals 0. So we'll do minus 14 to both sides, and then that'll get us to say equals 0. So that gives us x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0. So now this turns into a factoring problem. Right? We're trying to figure out what multiplies to negative 20 and adds up to negative 1. So we have 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 3 doesn't work, 4 and 5. So 4 and negative 5 would be our combination. Okay, so now we could factor it. So we would factor into x plus 4, x minus 5 equals 0. Is that each factor equal to 0? So x plus 4 equals 0. We know that if we minus 4, we got it solved. So x equals negative 4. And x minus 5 equals 0. Add the 5 over, so x equals positive 5. So 2 possible solutions, and we are done. Let's take a look at 14. Solve for x by completing the square. So first thing we'll do is we want to move this constant over to the other side. So x squared plus 6x, leave a space, equals 4. Okay, next step, we want to take the square root of x squared, which is x, copy the sign down, which is a plus, take half of this b term, we call it, half of 6 is 3, put this in parentheses, squared on the outside. 3 squared, that's our next step. 3 squared is 9. Okay, so we introduce that to the left side up here. So 3 squared is 9. Whatever we introduce to the left, we have to introduce to the right. Okay, so now we have the x squared plus 6x plus 9. That becomes x plus 3 squared. And then 4 plus 9, that gives us 13. So now this is the equation we're trying to solve. X plus 3 squared equals 13. So next, we want to undo the squaring with a square root. So square root both sides. So x plus 3 equals plus or minus. Now the square root of 13 would stay the way it is. Right? Nothing breaks down with 13. And then minus the 3 both sides. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 13. And that would be our final answer. Okay, so let's take a look at our next problem. F of g of x. So that means we're going to take the g of x and plug it into the f of x. Right? So basically doing this. F of x squared plus 1. So we have the f of x, which is 1 over 2x. So this will become 1 over 2 times x squared plus 1. Which, if we just distribute the 2, gives us 1 over 2x squared plus 2. And that's it. Okay, next we have f of g of 2. Okay, so what we can do is realize we just did f of g of x. So if we have f of g of 2, that means we could just plug into this equation, and that gives us our solution. So just plug the 2 in there and simplify it. 2 squared is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. And 8 plus 2 is 10. So 1 over 10. Okay. Divide. First, converting radicals to fractional exponents. Answer should be expressed using fractional exponents, not radicals. So we have the 6x squared. Now for our denominator, it's the cube root of 8x squared. So this will be 8x squared to the 1/3 power, which means we have 8 to the 1/3 and x squared to the 1/3. We would multiply there. That would be 2 times 1/3, so 2/3. Next, we would simplify. We have 6x squared. 8 to the 1/3, that's the cube root of 8, so 2. And now we could simplify between the 6 and the 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then x squared divided by x to the 2/3, we're subtracting. So subtract. So we're subtracting 2 minus 2/3. So 2 would be 6/3 minus 2/3. So we end up with 4/3. So we have 3 and then x to the 4/3. And that would be it. That's our fractional exponent. And that's our final answer. Okay, so that'll be it for this part of the review. Okay, we'll continue with our next part. Okay, see you soon.